This is WCEO's Elevate Us All, intentional conversations and research data that illuminate the lived experiences of women of color in our community. Our goal is to lift up solutions that help Black and brown women feel seen, honors our experiences, and ultimately elevates all the residents of Central Ohio to shared prosperity. I'm CEO Keena Smith, and thank you for joining us.
I am here with Meredith Lawson-Rowe. And listen, real talk, I've been excited to talk with you for a little while. I have to say this because I remember we met years ago, and I think you were running for an office.
Yes.
And so here's the funny thing. When you meet folks in politics, particularly like local politics right here, there's two things that I think about. One is we drastically underestimate how important local politics are because everything happens here at home. And so we're thinking like, go vote for the presidential election. It's like, that's cool, but your life is impacted by the things that are happening in your community. And those elections, we don't vote in. So that's a whole thing. And then I was just like, wow, I'm in the suburbs and this is a Black woman running for a local. So I'm like, that's a whole thing, which I'm like, I'm sure there was a story about even how you got there, the experience, the whole kind of thing. But here's the other thing that I realized when we bumped into each other fairly recently. I'm like, yeah, you probably have a whole job that's not politics. Completely didn't even, I was already thinking like family life, parents, kids, this whole kind of thing, but didn't even dawn on me like, you're a whole person with all kinds of responsibilities and things and bills to pay and all of this kind of stuff. So if you could, and shout out to all the women out there who are like, you have all of the roles that you're carrying. And sometimes we forget and we don't humanize the fact that you're carrying a lot. In fact, sometimes too much, and trying to be the responsible person in all of these positions. So I want to first let you know I see you and I appreciate all that you do. Can you share a little bit about what you do for to keep the lights on, and then also share about, the other hats that you wear? Because I want to make sure we have the full perspective.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. It is quite an honor to actually sit here and chat with you because I am a fan, first of all. So when I met you back in 19, I thought I want to get close to the fire because what she is bringing is real life situations that we can talk about that a lot of times we just stuff down and bury and swallow it. So I'm excited. So what I do in my real world is not uncommon for other women like me that serve in local public office. By trade, I am an executive assistant. So I'm that worker bee that makes others look good. It's my job and it's my comfort zone to be in the background to make sure my manager and team has everything that they need in order to do their job in terms of presentations, calendaring, any type of concierge type work. And I've been in this space for 25-ish years or so. So not only here in Ohio, but also in Georgia.
Okay.
So I've had an opportunity to work with C-suite level executives, up and coming executives, mid-level. So that's what I do in order to pay the bills, to keep the lights on, as you say. My real passion is being out in the community and serving. I really believe it's in the fabric of my DNA because I can remember being a kid going to community organizing meetings with my mom, doing church work with my mom, leading youth activities in the community and in the church, serving when I was a student athlete in terms of giving back to those that didn't have the opportunities that I had. So my journey is not uncommon of many of my peers, because in order for my family to thrive, I roll my sleeves up just like my husband.
Yeah.
And so we're blessed to be a two-parent household. But oftentimes I said tongue in cheek, jokingly, but 3/4 of the way serious, I need a third adult in my house.
Yes.
In order to help, close that gap of everything that needs to be done in terms of paying bills, keeping the house going, dealing with kids, doing fun stuff, being a whole person, and not always that drill sergeant. Did you, when are, did you, this needs to be done, so on and so forth. So thank you for recognizing that I do have a day job, and I have to remind people, well, this job pays my bills, so I can't do X, Y, and Z in the community because I have to go to work.
Yes. And when I met you, you were looking into politics. How did that, I'm guessing watching, it sounds like your mother introduced you to service on a grander scale, which, by the way, is so beautiful. It's interesting that I find in a lot of folks' stories, we don't get to where we're going. We don't find our pathways by ourselves. There's usually someone who either introduces us to something, shows us something we haven't seen before, or sees something in us. And right. And so, and I'm hearing a little bit of that in your story. So share with me, like, how then when I'm looking at you on poster boards and I'm like, look at you. Talk to me about that.
And I'm like, girl, how'd you get up there? So it's very interesting that you say that you get to where you are because someone brings you along, or someone sees something in you that you don't see in yourself. And so that's my story. So girl, get out of my head. So my mother, she is a fierce woman. She has since retired, and you had an opportunity to meet her at a town hall meeting. And it's reminiscent when I was a kid, she would drag me to everywhere with her to these meetings and conferences and work in the community and such. And so now the tables have turned and I get to drag her places with me. So yes, she did introduce to not only me, but my brother, how important it is to serve and give back, because we are a part of the community. And what we want to see done, we have to be a part of the doing. We can't just say such and so needs to take care of that. I can remember being a kid working in the food pantry and organizing shelves and stocking shelves and so forth. So fast forward, how did I get into politics? Wonderful question, because it was totally not on my purview. It wasn't a part of my 10-year plan. It wasn't anything that I'd ever thought I could do, because first of all, I don't come from a political family. I don't have the political education. I thought you had to have all of these degrees to serve. I thought you had to come from political stock. And quite frankly, I thought you needed to come from money, all of which I'm not. So how I got into politics was, first of all, just serving.
Yes.
Again, back to what I do to pay the bills. My comfort zone is being in the background, helping others look good. So it was easy for me to write postcards for candidates. It was easy for me to be in the background and run someone's social media as if I was that person running for office. It was easy for me to say, hey, Kim, I'm helping so-and-so. Do you mind donating $25 for the cause? So I could do all that. And so when it came time for, in 19, when a friend of mine who happens to be my council colleague, and I've happened to know for as long as I lived here, which is about 17, 18 years, she asked me, hey, why don't you run for office? I said, you are crazy. No. I'll help whoever you get.
Right.
So after being asked several times, and shout out to Amelia Sykes, our former minority leader in the state house, who's now running for Congress in the Akron area. Shout out to her, because I first learned from her, and I've heard several times over, it normally takes 7 times for a woman to agree to run for office. So let's get it out of the way right now. Yeah. Run for office, run for office, run for office, run for office, run for office. I want you to run for office. What do you think about running for office?
I love that.
So it normally takes women 7 times to be asked to run for office before they agree.
Yes.
Okay, in my experience, I think it took 15, 20, 25 times. So they asked me, then they started working on my husband. My husband started working on me. I'm like, are you serious? So what debunked all of the myths that I had in my head about running for office, that shout out to Kristen Bryant, Councilmember Kristen Bryant, football mom, neighbor, friend. She said, you're already doing the work. You're just not getting recognized for that work.
Yes.
You're already organizing. You're already encouraging people to get civically involved. You're already working in the schools and PTA. You're already being a team mom with the Little League football team. You're already galvanizing people to do stuff that you're interested in. I used to run half marathons. And so I would encourage women to come on and walk or run a 5K with me. And so I always was the one to encourage others to get involved. And so I thought, maybe she's onto something. Yes. And so really, essentially, that's how I got into the space. So after her encouraging me to debunking my myths and her just getting the petitions and say, hey, go do this. And walking with me to knock doors to get signatures on the petition. Excuse me, that's exactly how I got started. And it wasn't glamorous. And in the very beginning, I was not 100% in, because I was trying to make up these excuses why I couldn't run for office. And one of my favorite stories is, at the time, my manager at the time, I said, hey, they want me to run for office and I'm thinking about it, but I'm not sure. And he said, well, why are you telling me? And there was like a natural pause. And then he said, oh, you want me to talk you out of it? He said, oh no, I won't be the one.
Yep.
And so when he said he thought it was a good idea, and he thought that I would be good at serving, it did something inside of me. And in full transparency, I think a lot of the times we as women, and sometimes we as Black women, we look for affirmation on the outside when we already have it on the inside.
We are on the same page, because I literally, while you were saying that, I was writing down that we often need the endorsement of others, right? We are looking for someone else to tell us we're worthy of something.
And we are enough, but we have to believe
all by
it.
Ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking that as you were saying, and I'm sitting here, and there are so many things you are saying that are so relevant for part of what we're talking about, right? Which is like this inequity that we experience in these places and spaces, not either whether it's us believing it or someone else believing that we are not supposed to be there, people not either seeing, recognizing, or believing that we are at risk of having an unstable psychological safety in the workplace, which is not about us, it's about the environment, right? And about when spaces are hostile to us. And then when it gets into this inequity, not just in experience, but in pay and representation and all of these things, I'm thinking about this as you're saying this. And then what's so interesting about your story, Meredith, is, and I'm thinking, and then in your day job, you are, and I'm kind of using some of your words and some of the words I've heard is, you're making other people who are making money look good. You're making other people who are powerful look good. And then part of why they're making that money is because you're there. right? It's like unplug you, and do you actually make that much money? Are you that successful? Right. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking, we do this all the time. So what is it that gets in the way of us asking for what we're worth, for us demanding what we're worth? What gets in the way of systems just paying us equitably? Like, what are your thoughts about that?
That's a lot to unpack. Well, first of all, I think we have to give ourselves permission to speak up.
Yes.
We have to stand on our own confidence to say, hey, I'm tapping you on the shoulder.
Yep.
Funny, not so funny story, but early in my career, when I was a young wife, young mom, I worked in an organization, and I literally had 3 titles. And it was a small organization. It was a Christian organization. And so you hear me say small, you hear me say Christian. And so those were the excuses I was telling myself. And then finally I said, hey guys, you know what? Literally, I'm doing 3 people's jobs. These are 3 distinct titles.
Yes.
I don't believe that I can be excellent in any because I'm doing too many things. I'm doing good, but I could really be fantastic if you allow me to hone in on one job and not 3 jobs. So after working those 3 jobs, 3 titles, 1 job, getting the pay of 1 job, I was confident enough to go to my manager and say, hey, I'm not sure if you see what's going on, but literally I have 3 different bosses depending on what job I'm doing.
Yes.
So fast forward, after being there for however long, and when I put in my notice and it was time for me to move on to my next journey, oddly enough, Kim, funny, not so funny, do you know that this small Christian organization hired 3 people?
Of course they did.
On my departure.
Of course.
And so initially it was a gut punch. And then it had become like a little joke, if you will, in the office. And then one time, one of my assistants, who happened to be a young white male, he was a college student, graduate student. And he said, Miss Meredith, so they need 3 women to do 1 Black woman's job?
Out of the mouths of babes.
And that was my response. It was like, you said it, not me.
Right. Yes.
So it took someone else to squarely in the eye to say what I had been thinking.
Yes.
And so that there was a huge lesson to me.
Yes.
Was like, they don't see me. I'm not being valued. And I think I was, because they were wonderful people. Mm-hmm. But in that space, I don't know. I can't even give an excuse. That's my experience. That's my story.
Right.
I'm sticking to it.
Right. And, and it makes me wonder too, the role of systems, right? Like when something has been in place for so long, then I think there are people, particularly disenfranchised folks, who are subject to how the system works. And then even the folks who are in majority identity, I don't think always even realize how you are plugged into perpetuating this system. You're used to underpaying us. You're used to not valuing us. So you don't even know you're doing it anymore. It just looks like Wednesday to you, and I wonder how many of us have these stories about this is what normal looks like. And then we end up having to make major adjustments in our body, minds, and spirits to even show up. because we're living, I was working with a client recently and I was trying to show them, even based on data, your Black and brown people are having a completely different experience in the office than your white people are at work. And I don't think it was on anyone's radar. And the inclination is to say, well, that's not true. How do you know? You have no idea what this life is. You have no lived experience in this, in these racialized and these bodies that look like ours. You don't know what the lived experience is. And then we do this over and over and over again. So because you are in the business of hope, and I don't just mean career-wise, but you just have a spirit and an energy to you that I think is aspirational and is
thank you.
I think you think about, it's the truth. I think you think about what's possible, what could be, what's helpful, otherwise we wouldn't be doing service work, right? Because service work is let me figure out how I can support you so you can be at your best, right? Let's fill in the gap, fill in the deficit. So a couple questions that are forward thinking. What does psychological safety at work for Black women look like? Imagining a future where we're not showing up at work like we've had to. We're not worried about does my pay look like theirs? We're not worried about are you treating me? Are you giving me the opportunities that you're giving everybody else? What do you imagine, the daughters, nieces, and of the future? What do you imagine their work experience can be?
Excellent question, because a lot of what I do is for the next generation. It's for my daughter, my daughter-in-law, my grandbabies, my niece.
Yes.
Because we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors.
Absolutely.
So I'm here because my grandmommy had to pay a poll tax.
Wow.
And for me to be in local office after she had to pay a poll tax, and I'll never forget when Obama was elected the first time. I didn't even know he was elected because I was moving that day. And when I finally sat down and turned on the news, I saw that he won, and I called grandmommy and we bawled on the phone together. And so she shared the story with me that has been shared numerous times about having to pay a poll tax in Texas. And me being a kid, naive, why did you have to pay a poll tax, grandmommy? She said, I don't know. That's just what we did in those days. And so fast forward, my mom, she was the first woman, asterisk, Black woman, to be chief probation officer for juvenile court.
Okay.
I might be messing it up, but she was the chief probation officer.
Yes.
Which was huge. And this was back late 70s, early 80s. And then she went on to work for the state and was over the chief. And I hope I'm not messing this up, but she was over all of the chiefs, probation officers in the state. So she had to travel around the state.
Wow.
So they did all that good work so that I could be where I am today.
Yes.
So the work that I'm doing for the next generation, I want them to have that safety and the confidence that I didn't have. And I can already see it in my 21-year-old daughter, and I can see it in my almost 10-year-old grandbaby. And I tell my daughter all the time, I wish that I were like you and didn't care about what other people thought, and that I just did me, like you're doing you.
Yes.
And how you navigate even the naysayers.
Yes.
She's so underestimated and has been for her entire life. In terms of school, her teachers, she was my baby that needed to have intervention services where we had to meet with the guidance counselors and teachers every 6 weeks. And this was in second grade, I think. And
Wow.
then when she got to middle school, I'm like ready to meet with the teachers. They're like, no, she doesn't need it. And then she fast forwards and she is National Honor Society. And fast forward, she is finding her own way and going to a school in a totally different city and state.
Awesome.
And just doing the big thing.
Yes.
So let me just drill back. I'm kind of getting off topic.
You're not though.
So safety looks like when my daughter and my grandbaby can show up to work as their authentic selves.
And what does that look like? Because sometimes people say them, they're like, what does that mean? What does that mean?
So what does that look like? That means that I don't have to laugh at the jokes that I don't understand.
Ooh, say that again for the people in the back. Yeah.
It means that I can have a curly afro, braids, locks, straight hair, no hair. That's what it means. It means that I don't have to know everything about your culture and not raise my hand and say, let me share a little bit about my culture. So let me give you a story that I want to share. So growing up, I lived in a predominantly white school district. So I was normally one of only 3 or 4 in my class, if that many. So I always knew what it was like. I knew their songs, I knew their history, I knew their culture, but they didn't know anything about me.
Yes.
And then I tried to share a little bit, and because they came from all white worlds, they're like, what is this little black girl talking about? Okay, so fast forward to 2019, when I finally was all in running for office, and I stood in that space and said, hey, I'm going for it. Win, lose, or draw, I'm going for it. And then when the momentum was building, I was like, whoo, there might be a chance that I win. If I win, what do I want to do?
Yes.
What do I want to bring? What do I want to talk about? And, some people might say it was an aha moment, an eureka moment, or they had a good idea, but it was a God moment for me.
1,000%.
My God said, we're going to do Juneteenth. I didn't know what that meant. So elected in 19, began my serving in 20. Then we know what happens in March of 2020, the world stops.
Yes.
I still wanted to do something for Juneteenth. So I had asked our mayor if he would offer a proclamation recognizing Juneteenth in Reynoldsburg. And he said, sure, but it's coming from me. Don't you want to do something where it's coming from you as a resolution? And I said, well, thank you, but no, I want you to do it because I want a larger platform to recognize Juneteenth. So he agreed. And he said, we should do something for Juneteenth. And I said, yes, but we're in the middle of the pandemic. I'm just not sure how it will work. So literally in 8 to 10 to 12 days, I planned a celebration on the steps of City Hall.
Wow.
When I tell you just the mere fact that we could talk about Juneteenth on the steps of City Hall was huge to me.
Yes.
I'm sure huge to our community,
yes.
huge to our ancestors, because the steps of City Hall have not been kind to our people.
Facts.
And so when we raised the Juneteenth flag at City Hall, I bawled and wailed, and it came out of nowhere. And all I could say was, yes, for my grandmommy, and yes, for Papa. Yes, yes. So here we are in beginning the plans for our 4th annual Reynoldsburg Juneteenth. And I'm so grateful to be able to use this platform to bring awareness about Juneteenth. And might I add, we were one of the first suburbs to recognize Juneteenth before it had become a federal holiday.
Yes.
And so I feel like we were on the grassroots, and it has nothing to do with me. It was all about my God, and it's all about my community, because we had come together to offer a celebration for Juneteenth. And it wasn't all Black people, it was Black people, it was white people, it was Latino, it was the Bhutanese community, it was everybody.
Yes.
And so let me bring it back to, what does psychological safety look like for Black women? It looks like sharing a piece of our world.
Yes.
And so at my current company now, when 2022 opened up and we were back in the office, I tapped my manager at the time on the shoulder and said, I want us to do something for Juneteenth. And he says, well, I think that's great. And I said, no, I want us to do something for Juneteenth, and I don't want to depend on anybody. I will raise my hand and volunteer to do something. And so we were able to have a conversation about Juneteenth at work, which is huge to me, because most corporate organizations, well, let's go back 17 years ago, many corporate organizations did not have Juneteenth on their radar. They did not have
they didn't have us on their radar. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said they didn't have us on their radar.
Yes. So we still have ways to go, but baby steps, and we'll celebrate all along what baby steps that we have. So psychological safety means that I'm confident enough, even though I may not be in a safe space, to say, hey, look at me.
Mm-hmm.
Let me share a little bit about my culture.
Yes. Yes. That's a perfect way for us to kind of wrap up, because I'm sitting here and I am so full, thinking about what you have done up to this point, right? And what I hear in your story, Meredith, is not just about the true value of us as Black people, of us as Black women. I think also too, I see the specificity of your value to Black people, your value to Black women, your value to community, in a place and space where you weren't seeking to be visible, but to see now in the story, it was necessary and imperative that you be visible, because you just not only increased your worth, but you increased the worth of us in spaces where we weren't being seen, heard, valued. And I just want to say thank you, not just for this time that we've held together, but just like, thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're going to do. Thank you for the impression that you're putting forth for our girls. And I just want to, by the way, before we end, I want to show you something. We started our conversation with you talking about how your mother modeled service. And you're modeling service.
Thank you.
You just pass it on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. I am sitting here with Eleanor Palmer Bailey and Marketta Franklin Thomas, and I'm cheating. I'm cheating because we have been able to spend a whole bunch of time with each other lately. And I so wish that the world could hear all of the sound bites of a lot of our conversations, and possibly, in full transparency, none of the sound bites of some of our conversations, because we've just been having some real talking. It's one of the things that's been so refreshing about getting to know you and just feeling already just like a kinship to you both is, I think folks forget that let me actually say it this way, because I'm going to keep this completely real. It has been surprising to me how many times, and almost unsettling, how many times I ran into professional Black women who didn't feel that they could be fully who they were. And I've even had a time or two older Black women pull me to the side. And on one end of the spectrum, I've had them say, you need to kind of pipe down and kind of pull it in kind of thing. And then I've had other ones who have said, I wish I could be as authentic as you, but I didn't have the ability to do that. I'm like, oh, what is going on in the professional space? Like, the further up we get, the less we see of ourselves. And then we're having these experiences that nobody knows we're having. And some of them are a little bit painful. And I don't think people realize we're having these experiences. And then with so few people who look like us in these spaces, there are very few people to talk with, about what we're experiencing. So that's why I'm so appreciative of this series, and why I'm finding a lot of people are like, when are you doing the next one? I'm like, there's only 3, but we'll see if this is a conversation we need to continue. So that's it. Can you both share who you are and what you do? But I want to leave that open to however you do that, because I often tell people where you work is what you do, but it's not who you are. So you can share what you do too, but however you would like to come into the space sharing who you are, I welcome that.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Eleanor Palmer Bailey. I work as Associate Vice President, Associate General Counsel at Nationwide Insurance here in Columbus, Ohio. And who I am is authentically Black. I like my Blackness. I love living in it. And it's interesting that you say, can we bring authentic selves to work? And as we get higher, I feel the opposite. Like, I feel like I'm more authentic now in the workplace than I was when I entered the workplace. And I don't know if that's a function of my maturity and comfort level with myself, or if that's the world's maturity and comfort level with Black people. So that's who I am.
Thank you for that. Marketta?
Yes, hello, Marketta Franklin Thomas. And what I do is I am the leader of learning and employee development at AEP. So that is my job title. Who I am is a champion of the underdog. And I have found myself operating in that space. I've been at AEP for 27 years, and I started at a very humble place in my career, doing work, not really seeing the future that I would be able to go from working in a call center environment, not having a degree, not having my education, to advancing to be the head and lead of learning and employee development at my organization. And so that journey has helped me really shape my perspective about creating access opportunities for women, for people of color. And that is something that I'm obsessed with, about how people get access into spaces that they've not been invited to.
So you both have already said something that makes me curious. One thing that I find that shows up when I'm having some of these conversations, particularly with Black women, is whether we're intentionally doing it or not, we end up modeling things and we end up advocating for things, even when we're not trying to, right? So 2 things I heard, Eleanor, when you were saying like, I'm Black, like unapologetically, I'm showing up in this space, whether you ever explicitly state that in the workplace or not, what it's doing is it's for someone else, it's giving them permission to be like, can I actually show up like that? And then by virtue of how you show up, you're saying, yes, you can, right? Which is huge, because it's one thing for someone to say it, it's different to model it, right?
And I've had, I don't like to call them younger staff, junior staff maybe at Nationwide. Black women say that to me because I am an officer at the company, and they've said, thank you for giving us that space. Thank you. And I didn't, like you said, I didn't even know I was doing it. I just thought this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. This is who I'm showing up. And they are noticing it and saying, we appreciate that. We notice it and we appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And this reminds me of something you said in there too, Marketta, and that is, you talked about underdogs and you talked about access, right? And so what was resonating with me when you said that is, we hear business speak, corporate speak all the time about things like authenticity and these kinds of things, but policy is very different than practice. And there's a lot of stuff where something's written on a piece of paper and it looks great on paper, but you don't live it, or you don't mean it. And we have these lived experiences that don't match what the policy states. And so I heard that very clearly in what you were saying, Marketta, that you've had a lived experience and now you try to do the work that creates access because it's something that was reflected in your story. But I bet money that it's not so much the policy, but it's that your behavior, your posture is the invitation for people to believe that's true.
Oh, absolutely. When I think about 27 years at a company and 27 years of what I call scrapping, right? Being very resilient, being very gritty, and having to seek the opportunities without formal sponsorship, without formal mentorship, and working very hard to figure out where I could actually get a seat at the table. It took a while. So I have been a director 4 or 5 years now, but it did take a while to get there. Mm-hmm. And what I want for the women who are coming behind me, because to Eleanor's point, I do feel obligated, I feel compelled, and I feel committed to the other Black young women who are at my company to care, to give them space to talk and to share what their concerns are, ask for questions, ask for help, because I didn't have it. Yeah. And so having to be so resilient, so scrappy, and good at what I do, right? It has taken a toll. It is hard work.
So right there, this leads me into this thing. And we were just talking about this. And what's disturbing about what I'm going to ask is, I can't believe how often I actually have this conversation if I force folks to lean into it, right? Like you start talking about race and gender, particularly with people who aren't living in these racialized bodies. And it's amazing to me, especially when you introduce the element of not even if you choose to code switch or not, but the pressure to code switch or not, how much we know about other people and how little they know about us. And one of the things that I'm noticing that is showing up when I'm actually saying, hey, when we're talking about whether it's DEI issues, social justice issues, right? Folks don't want to talk about it. I'm like, no, we need to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. And then it gets really awkward in the space because people don't know how to show up in the space. Particularly, I notice it happens when you have spaces when there are white people and folks who are not white. And when I'm really like, we have to talk about it so that we can figure out this whole thing, what's going on, identify the injustice and do something about it. One of the things that shows up is folks have no idea about the experience. And in some cases, if they're bold enough to say so, are almost dismissive or in denial about what the true lived experience is. Can y'all speak to whether you've experienced it personally or whether you've seen that happen? Like, some folks don't get like when we talk about like, we're healing, from some of the traumatic experiences we've had in the workplace. And there are some people who are like, what trauma? Like, what trauma have you had as a Black woman in the workplace? It's not that serious. You go to work and you make a choice and you leave. And it's just like, you have no idea. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I can start and there's just two thoughts that are two instances that are coming to mind. And I remember, I talk about that, I have always been gritty, so I'm going to find a way. You may not want me at the table, but I really am going to work really hard to figure out how to, get there. And I've always been about adding value, right? So it's not just about see me, but it's about how can I add value. And over my career, there have been instances where I have had the you're out of line, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten the you're out of line, but without that being, explicitly stated, So no one has said to me, you're out of line. I've had people say things like, who do you think you are? Right? That's not your job. That's not your space. And so that mindset of you are operating in a way that makes me uncomfortable, that makes me, that I feel like is above your particular carriage, Marketta. And I would like for you to get back into your lane. I would like for you to get back into the space that I've created for you, or the box where I'm trying to keep you. And there have been many instances over my career where I've had that type of experience. And so, a part of you, I'm from Steubenville, so a part of me is like, well, hold on a second, right? Hold on.
Yeah,
no,
we take care of this, right?
Right. But if I'm honest about how that makes you feel, because that's when the questioning begins to happen. Because you're thinking, okay, you know what? I'm ambitious. I really feel like I should be here. I have an idea on how we can do this better. Or, I've got some insight and I really want to share that. And I think it's going to add value. And then to be, confronted with, no, this is not for you. This conversation is not for you. That's when I know, my young self, my young mind began questioning whether or not I was articulating my ideas appropriately. And so I would second guess. I'd be second guessing things before they even left my mouth. And so that questioning, I think that imposter syndrome and that feeling like, yeah, I do need to keep fighting for the seat, but I'm also, double checking myself. Are you doing it right? And do you actually deserve a seat at the table? And I think that we do have to address the tapes and the stories that we tell ourselves as a result of that lived experience.
And before you jump in here, Eleanor, question, do you think that when you were speaking about that second guessing, that imposter syndrome phrase was sitting in my head when you were talking, do you think that impacts how we then have so many instances, particularly as Black women, where like, we're not getting paid what other people are getting paid. We're not, it's just, and where it's just like, well, I didn't think to ask for more, or I just, and then you find out later, like, I didn't have the title, I didn't have the power, I didn't have the paycheck that looked like somebody else's, because whether it was explicit or implicit, you made me feel like I didn't deserve it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And doing the work, and also still feeling like, although you don't have the title, you don't have the pay, okay, what do I need to do? If I don't have the sponsor, if I don't have my direct leadership recognizing, that you're not fully penetrated in the pay scale, if you don't have that type of support, then it's like, okay, well, maybe I do need to just keep working hard, right? And so that whole thought that we have about just keep working hard, keep showing up, keep being better than everybody else all the time, every day, every job, showing up, that pressure and that experience is something that I am very familiar with.
But I think we go into the workplace, Marketta, like you said, thinking that that's what it takes, work hard. And then the longer you're in the job or company that you're in, you realize that's not it. It doesn't have anything to do with working hard. And so your eyes are open, so to speak, because no one told us these things, right? We don't have legacy of corporate, vice presidents and executives to tell us these things. Now we have these webinars where people are passing down this knowledge. But when I first got into the workplace, it was like, oh, great, you got a job here, get to work. There was nobody looking out for me to say, hey, this is how you ask for more money during your performance evaluation. This is how you even write your performance evaluation so that you are identifying the skills that they're looking for, right? It's a strategy, it's a whole thing. And if no one is really teaching you the game, you're going to lose every time.
And this
Oh,
makes me, like, yes and amen and ashe, right? And what it makes me think about is a word that you have mentioned a couple different times, Marketta. And so I have had this conversation and have a whole session that I do with some of my folks sometimes about the difference between partners, mentors, and sponsors. Like, you got some people who just kind of doing life or doing work with you. Sometimes you got a mentor, right? And the mentor's like, hey, read this book, go talk to this person, have this meeting or whatever. But sometimes you need a sponsor. You need someone to make something happen for you. You need somebody to make a way for you. Need somebody to be in that room before you ever get in there to speak goodwill for and over you, right? You need someone to show you that there's some keys to the kingdom and to actually like let them go. And it's fascinating to me how many people, particularly Black people, particularly Black women, don't have those things. Why do
Right,
you think that is?
because I think of sponsorship as political capital, right? I'm going to use my political capital that I've built over the years at this company, and I'm going to spend it on you.
Yes.
But I'm not going to spend that on you if I don't really know you like that. And I'm not really going to know you like that if I'm not really comfortable with getting to know you. And so there's this barrier. And so I'm just like so tired of the sponsorship conversations, because they almost are presented as if you, the person in need of sponsor, you just have to ask for it. And all you have to do is just get it, as if it's out there for the picking, right? Like as if I can just decide, oh, you know what? Kimberly Brazwell, I want her as my sponsor. Let me go tell her, you know what? I picked you, and I think you should be my sponsor. It doesn't work like that.
So let's lean into that a little bit, because I can't tell you how many spaces people are like, you just need to make the initiative and just go talk to somebody,
Right.
just go make that. I will tell y'all, like, real talk, this actually happened. When I first wanted to go into entrepreneurship full time, when I was like, I'm taking the big, people take the leap, I'm like, I took the leap and I'm going to have a conversation with people. And I remember, this person shall go unnamed, but there was a really powerful person, very well connected, who said that they believed in the work that I did. So when it was time for me to go full time, big leap, I set a meeting with her. And I talked with her and I'm like, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to leverage this skill set. I know, right? And I'm having that conversation, but like, how do I do this? This is essentially like, I need you to kind of, she essentially basically told me her start in the work pretty much was able to happen because she came from a family with money and she married wealthy. And so her spouse already had plenty of contacts. And so she was almost ingratiated into successful business, because it was like, and in that, it was nothing like, and let me introduce you to some people. It was like, and good luck. And I'm like, but I just did what you told me to do. I pulled a person who I felt like I had no business talking to. Mm-hmm. And I did the meeting and I kind of put myself out there and like, I'm not sure what to do next. I don't know how to do this. And you basically told me you came for money. Good luck and Godspeed.
Right. Well, and I think culturally, what I hear is that, culturally, what happened there is this, sometimes I feel like, having enough seats at the table for all of us and making space, right, and holding space for each other is something that we have to figure out. Mm-hmm. But also generational fluency, right? I think that we're talking about, people of color, women of color, but there's also a generational fluency deficiency here, because for the few that were able to make it, sometimes there is a mindset of, I didn't have anybody and I'm looking like I don't have anyone, right? But they're saying, well, I had it even harder. So you need to work a little bit hard, as hard as I did, because I had nothing, right? And I'm giving you a little bit of something, so I need for you to work. And I would like for us to not have to work so hard. And I say, to the women that I mentor, I don't want them to have to work so hard, because you have to look out And to Eleanor's point, we didn't have anyone giving us that legacy of knowledge, right? Helping us craft our strategies early. You shouldn't have to wait 20 some years to craft a strategy, right? And stumble through it. And from a generational perspective, we need people to say that because I had nothing, I need to make it as easy for you as possible, not I need you to work and scramble.
Right. It's like the cheat codes, right? Every video game, has got the cheat codes, right? And you get the cheat codes, you can move with the levels. I think every organization has those same cheat codes, right? I can't imagine that I can take what I know about Nationwide and transfer it over to AP and Marketta's organization. So I need Marketta to kind of tell me, hey, this is how we do it over AP, right? This is how you need to show up. This is how you need to, these are the people you need to connect with. This is how you write the tone of your email. This is how, it's just little stuff, right? These little things that derail careers, and we can do it. It's not like we can't do it. It's not hard stuff, but why can't we get the cheat codes too?
So what's interrupting us doing this? And then how do we interrupt the interruption?
I think it's like Marketta is saying, it's so many people older than us that said, well, I didn't have it and I still got here. So, it's like this argument we're having now in this country about loan forgiveness. People are mad because they had to pay off their loans. So the other people shouldn't get their loans, debt free. And it's like, is that the attitude? Like, that should not be our attitude, that because I had to work hard, you got to work hard too. No, why can't we take that? Because I had to work hard, you shouldn't. And so I think we are shifting that a little bit in the workplace, because I know that my generation is doing that for the junior staff that are coming behind us. We're giving them the cheat codes to the extent that we know them.
But to me, what I also hear and what I hear in that is that y'all are healthier, like holistically healthier, right? Like your body, mind, and spirit would have to be healthy enough to be okay with doing that. Like if I'm still bitter, or if I'm still angry, it's like, you're not getting more than me.
Right.
That's it's just like, calm down. Like, get healthy so that's not a big deal. You're not competing with me. Right.
Oh,
this is not unlike this whole Ubuntu thing. Like, if you don't think we're connected, then you're okay with me not being okay. You're okay with me failing. You're okay with me struggling. But I look like you, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm connected to you. So that's not going to really look separate. That just means collectively we're not good because you're not okay with me being good yet.
But I don't know that everybody has shed that competitive spirit, and that's a sad place to be, but I think that it still exists sometimes.
So this brings me to wanting to shout out Justice Vault. And although it wasn't even part of this, I think this is a wonderful framework for even thinking about, like, okay, what's the next iteration of this? What does it look like to interrupt these systems? What does it look, particularly for folks like us, right? And so preceding this conversation, Justice Vault did this wonderful event, this pitch competition, and beautifully, like we couldn't have lined it up better, a Black woman won.
Yeah.
Right? Perfectly in alignment with our conversation. Can you share a little bit about Justice Vault, why it exists? And for me, I would love your perspective, because we haven't even talked about this. I would love your perspective on what it meant for a young Black woman to win.
Yeah, absolutely. So Justice Vault is an initiative. Eleanor and I are co-founders, and we have 4 other co-founders that we've worked for the last 2 years. And it's an idea that was birthed out of a group of professionals and leaders in our city having conversations and having really heartfelt conversations about the injustices that are happening in our city. And this was following the murder of George Floyd. The lack of presence that we saw in terms of actually doing something that was going to get to the front line and to the heart and to the root of what was occurring in our city from a systemic perspective. And so the 6 of us decided that we wanted to do something. And in doing something, that meant we are all from corporations. And so we all have these jobs and these platforms that we could, very easily go to our corporations and say, hey, we would like to sponsor, a name, a company, a nonprofit, an agency that we all know and love, and figure out how we can address this issue of systemic racism there. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted something bold. We wanted something different. We wanted to push past the status quo and fight the status quo and give a platform to innovators in our city who are really focused on pulling out the root of racism and doing it in an innovative, bold way. And so our approach to funding them and helping them get off the hamster wheel of continuously seeking funds and seeking capital to make their dreams happen, to do the hard work, which was is a complete distraction, right? So when you are constantly focused on how do I sustain, how do I, to your point, get healthy, right? So that I can do this work, it detracts from the work. And so Justice Vault is all about giving a platform to the voices that we may not hear, but those that are on the front line, and helping them create a balance, right? So that they can have access, right, to capital, to be able to further their dreams and further their work, which is going to help us all in our community.
And what were y'all's thoughts last night birthing this thing? Because to me, the work that Justice Vault is doing, I think, is an extension of this conversation, right? Like, this conversation is about, like, well, we got this wealth gap and this wellness gap, regarding Black women. And I just saw what y'all did, that, like, in an institutional way, right? Like, this organizational way, responded to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have several Black women actually were in the pitch competition, right? Black women who are like, I don't have the money, to make this thing happen, and I don't know how to get it. And Justice Vault said, we got some money. Let's hear the idea.
Yeah.
And then a Black woman wins.
And I would love for Eleanor to share her perspective on that, because she says it brilliantly about, what we were hearing from folks who were on the circuit, about, how they were seeking these dollars. So I'm going to step back and let my sister really share, because she inspires me even when she talks about it. I think it's a wonderful way.
I think you said it, Marketta. I mean, we sit in these corporations, right? And, we talk about, we corporatize everything, right? And so we corporatize anti-racism, right? We're going to give millions. I mean, after George Floyd murder, we gave collective, United States, we gave millions of dollars, and it's almost like you're saying, here you go, here's the money, and go out and do it. And we'll sit back and we'll be like, oh yeah, that was a great job, right? Yes. But we're going to give the money to those that we're comfortable with, right? Yes. That political capital again, right? Oh, I'm comfortable with the United Way. I'm comfortable with the YWCA. I'm comfortable with the Urban League, right? Because those they've put in the work and they've demonstrated they do good work, right? Nothing against those organizations, but are those the only places that have the solutions, right? Can't we get to a grassroots level of funding where we talk to the people who are having the lived experiences, right? And but yet they don't have the access to the funds. And so can we hear from them? And can we say, we want to fund you, and we're not even sure that your idea is going to produce the outcomes that we seek, but we think it might. And we trust in you, and we believe in you that you're going to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it to make it work. And so if it doesn't work, we move to the next thing. We ideate off of that and we do the next thing. But if we never fund that innovation, how do we ever change our communities? How do we ever move the needle if we just keep doing the same thing over and over. So I like that we had some of those big organizations, Impact Columbus, the Urban League, United Way, there supporting the work because they feel the same way we do, yes. Right? They feel that, yes, there's good work to be done, both sides, top down and bottom up.
Mm-hmm. And this brings me to my last question, so I can give y'all back y'all's, because listen, y'all probably tired. You've been like putting together all this stuff for 2 years, and let me not ignore this. Y'all are whole people. You got families, you got lives, right? You have actual jobs on top of this beautiful work that you've done to service and support the Black community. But and your own experience, and so this is a lot. We hold so much, right? And so before I ask this last question, I just want to say thank you, for all that you hold and what you do, and to be exhausted and still be like, and this is important, so I'm gonna still go, right? I just want to acknowledge that. So my last question is this: what do you think the future looks like if we see like the kind of innovation that you are doing in Justice Vault, right? Of just saying like, let's think about this a different way. Let's revolutionize this. Let's like flip this on its head. Imagining if that was in place in the workplace, what would justice in the workplace look like, particularly for Black women, if we could flip that on its head in these corporate and professional spaces? What's possible?
I think we got to dismantle some of our HR practices and policies, redefining, challenging what talent looks like, because I think that is the filter that it kind of starts with. We all think of talent looks like me. I'm talented, so that's what it looks like. If I went to the Ohio State University for law school, then I think that's where everybody should have gone. And I'm not going to look at anybody has gone to a lesser tier school. Hey, if I had 10 years of litigation experience before I came in-house, then that's what is required. You have to have 10 years of experience doing this. And that just eliminates a lot of people from even being considered. And, it's crazy because sometimes the majority culture puts a higher standard on Black people than they themselves even have. So they have gone to the Ohio State University, but they're going to say to a Black candidate, well, I'm only looking at Black candidates that went to Harvard. Or they were the editor of the Law Review. But when you poll your own workforce who you think is successful, nobody else has that on their resume. So why are you requiring that as the definition of talent for Black people? So I think that has to be shaken up, and that whole process of performance reviews and what that looks like. Why is it that you are in a company and your performance review is done by one person? One person. You get stuck with a bad manager who doesn't have this, diversity lens or is not competent in diversity. That could be a derailer for you. So we got to look at some of these practices in the workplace that, are long-standing and ingrained, and shake it up.
Yeah. So I will, and I love that, shaking it up, especially with me being in HR. So I think that's important. But I will say this, in connecting this to what we do at Justice Vault. So if you think about who gets the opportunities in corporate America, it is a little bit of that, what have you done for me lately, right? It's I like this person because they're like me, or I have a halo effect because this person did something really great. And so oftentimes women of color and people of color, because we don't have the access, we're not a part of those conversations. So when you think about what we did at Justice Vault, is that we pulled down the curtain of, who actually gets an opportunity, right, to compete for those dollars. So inside of corporate America, it needs to be an open market. The closed door conversations about whether or not, I want this person to do this work and Eleanor's name never gets mentioned. That is what we have to pull away, that whole veil. And you have to make it so that it's an open market. And Eleanor, Marketta, Kimberly, we all have an opportunity to say, this is the talent, this is my idea, right? See me, and let's stop the network, right? And the conversations about who's going to get the opportunity, who's doing well, right? Because a lot of times I've also found it takes someone saying someone's name. I have been in meetings with men and I will hear them say someone else's name. And then all of a sudden you turn around and 6 months later, this person is getting an opportunity. This person is on a project. This person is getting promoted. And it's because of the names. And so in addition to the open market, because I know that that is not an overnight thing, we have to make sure that people are saying our names in rooms that we are not in. When we're not at the table, who is going to say the name? And I know, we get back to that sponsor conversation in the Capitol, but until we have that free open market, there's got to be some sort of reckoning where those conversations that are taking place behind closed doors are not so private, right? And we have
I always say, Marketta, what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. And so if we want people to do it, why aren't we measuring people on it? Why is that not a part of senior leadership's performance goals for the year? Like, what person of color did you sponsor and what rooms did you bring their name into? And therefore they got on these projects and these teams. That's easy to track. We don't even have to make it so ethereal, right? We can measure it. We can put it on paper and say, if this is important, this is part of your job. You have to sponsor a person of color, and this is what it looks like.
Well, and you're talking about accountability, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and be accountable, because the measurement, right, means that there is going to be some sort of accountability if that measurement is not met.
Right, but if all we're doing is saying it's important, is it really important?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because people are saying, okay, I heard you in the meeting and yeah, I'm trying to do those things. But if it ain't measured, it's not going to get done.
I think the measurement is what needs to happen until the heart and the minds catch up, because we're going to be here for a long time waiting for that. Yeah.
A long time waiting for hearts and minds to change. I think Hillary Clinton said that before. You can't legislate behavior.
Yep.
Like you can't legislate hearts and minds. You can legislate behavior. And so that's what we have to do.
And what I hear underneath all this is this, and it's interesting because one of the things that's popped up as a theme in these conversations is you change somebody's life when you see them. Mm-hmm. You change somebody's life when you see something in somebody and speak to it, right? And I see this individually and I see this collectively. I can't tell you how many people who have these phenomenal stories. And if you dig down in their stories, somebody saw something in them. Mm-hmm. Somebody spoke about them, spoke to them, right? And so this phrase, and I love the idea of hearing this phraseology, not in a way where we're thinking about somebody died and say their name. Don't wait for me to be under the ground to say my name. Right, on the other side of the daisy. Say my name today. Say my name to speak life into what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. And I hear this. So I want to speak y'all's names to say thank you to Marketta Franklin Thomas, to Eleanor Palmer Bailey. Y'all are some beautiful, brilliant Black disruptors. And I am so in love with that. Thank you for being unapologetic about your own value, about your own worth, and about your own, I deserve to be in this space, and I love that part of what this topic was supposed to be about is like this struggle to prove that we're valuable. Like, you don't value me, I'm undervalued. And you said in part of something you were saying earlier, Marketta, I don't want to just get in the space. Not only do I want to add value, but I hear in both of your stories, Eleanor and Marketta, I don't want to just add value. I have something to offer that will make this better, right? So do you want it better? Or do you want it status quo? Because without me, without my DNA on it, it stays status quo. I can flip this whole thing over and make this something you've never imagined, right? But you got to say my name in that room, and you got to make something happen. And so I'm so grateful for y'all, for who you are, what you do, the access that you are bringing to people and places and things. And I told y'all this yesterday, and I'm saying this today, and I'm believing that for someone who's going to listen to this conversation, these are the kinds of conversations, you are the kinds of people that people need to know and hear and be in fellowship with, because this is the kind of stuff that changes people's lives. I'm so glad somebody saw something in y'all, and I'm so glad that y'all are seeing things in other people, and you're bringing people up. We're doing the things that people don't believe that people do, particularly women, particularly Black women. We're not all catty and sassy and trying to sabotage folks. There's a lot of us out here trying to make meaningful things happen in other people's lives, and y'all are some of the people that are doing that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for all of the beautiful energy that you bring. Love you.
Yeah.
I love y'all. Y'all are the best.
This has been good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to WCEO's Elevate Us All. We thank our sponsors, JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. The Women's Center for Economic Opportunity is a 501c3 based in Columbus, Ohio, dedicated to elevating and empowering African American women and other women of color in business and in the workplace. You can connect with us on the web at womensceo.org. Thank you for listening.